Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome to the Big Book Club. Yes. Books are back on telly. Every week, I'm going to be travelling around Scotland bringing you the world's best and best-selling novelists, non-fiction writers and poets. Yes, it's very important that the poets get out. We like to try and do our bit for their welfare. Tonight, we're in the Enchira Arts Club in Perthshire. And every week, I'm going to be getting out and about meeting a local book club, generally drinking their wine and eating their snacks and finding out what they think about one of our books. And for this week, I made my very first ever trip to Dundee. And I went to see the lovely people over there at the DC Thompson Book Club. So it's the Bruins Night Out. Welcome. Every week, we'll go deep on a theme. So tonight is all about memoir, the kind of memoir that really takes you to the heart of a person and makes you think about your own heart. Our guests tonight are journalist and writer Rick Samada, Janice Galloway, the incredible Maggie O'Farrell, and our poet is McMillan. I Am is a truly heart-stopping memoir describing the author's 17 brushes with death, from near misses of all kinds to near drownings. For all the fear, though, it does end up being one of the most joyful and celebratory books I have ever read. Please welcome the award-winning, best-selling, and now, frankly, uninsurable Maggie O'Farrell. Just as I was saying that about you being uninsurable, I was thinking about you walking up those 2 steps. Well, that could be a bonus chapter.
It could be.
In the ebook edition. Which of the brushes are you going to read for us?
I think I don't know what number it is actually, but it's the one it's the one that's called Cerebellum from 1980 when I was 8. So that's how old I am. Just before the end of the summer holidays, I woke up early and the world looked different. The colours of the rug, the curtains, the lampshade were more vibrant. They were pulsing like a heart, like a sea anemone. The bedroom appeared to be suddenly at an angle, the floor tilting, the windows cantilevering into the outside. The ceiling was like a film of floating liquid above me, a distant and blurred meniscus, and I was far below in some mysterious depth. Nothing was static. Everything shimmered and shifted. I had the sense that my sister in the lower bunk was miles away. I lay there, arms by my side, and took it in. The light, the colour, the motion. Oh, brave new world. When I went to get up, I raised myself off the pillow and a sensation burst open inside my head. It was a pain so severe, so pure, that it was as if someone was sounding a high soprano chord somewhere behind my eyes. It was a pain that stretched my head to bursting point, as if my skull was a balloon overfilled with water. This pain had colours and a personality. It was like being in the company of a needy, irascible person who insisted on embracing me too tightly, yakking in my ear, who never left me alone for a moment, who took over my life, who spoke for me, and never let me go. I have never felt pain like it, before or since. It was edgeless. It was perfect, the way the shell of an egg is perfect. And it was invasive, colonising. It sought, I knew, to take me over, to replace me with itself, like a bad spirit, like a fiend.
You described that pain as a kind of possession. What was actually happening? What were you going through?
Well, I was coming down with cerebellar encephalitis, although I didn't know that at the time. So I had extremely high fever, and it gives you a terrible, terrible headache, like nothing else. And that carried on. I had that headache with me for several months in the end.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, at the time it was so removed because I was only 8 years old. I think now, looking back, now I'm a parent myself, I think it was probably more terrifying for my parents, actually, than it was for me. So gradually I lost sort of various functions. So I lost sort of control of my limbs, and I lost control of walking, and I stopped being able to walk. And then I
weren't at home at this point?
No, at this point I was in a hospital, yeah. So, yeah, it was strange. It was one of those, it was like a sort of hinge of my childhood. So I was one person before it, and then afterwards I was quite another person. I think that's what severe illness can do to you. It's like passing through a fire and you come out the side something else.
So who were you before?
It's funny, I can't really remember. I remember being quite physically, I remember a kind of certain physical poise and ability, which I never had again, obviously. But at the time, of course, you don't think about it. It just felt normal and part of your birthright, in a sense. And I do remember feeling physically confident and stable in a way, which I've never felt since. But it's funny, one of the conversations I had after I'd written the book, because it's not something I really talk about, although I was actually registered disabled for a while. I'm not anymore, obviously, and I can pass as somebody who doesn't have physical disabilities in a sense, but obviously I do, and I've spent a lot of time in my life hiding them.
Why?
Well, it's funny. I think a lot of it goes back to school. Because you go back to school. I went back to school after a year or so, and I was a different person. I was completely different, and I was still quite disabled, and I wasn't able to write properly, or I couldn't go upstairs. And going back to school is tough when you're like that. It's a bit tough being different anywhere. But the fun thing was when because at that point I was living in South Wales, and I moved to Scotland when I was 13, so I went to high school in Scotland. And I remember saying to my mum when we were moving, I said, I don't want anyone to know at my new school. I don't want anyone to know this happened to me. And I thought, I can pass now. I can pass as somebody who's a bit clumsy, who falls over a bit, who's not very good at sport. And I thought, no one need ever know. And so at that point, I began hiding it, and I carried on, actually. And so there are really close friends of mine who read this book and just said, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's great. That's exactly what I wanted.
I've interviewed you over the years about novels, and we'd always talked about the idea of you writing a memoir, and you resisted the idea for years, and you said, I'm just never going to do it. Stop asking. I'm not going to write a memoir. And then I got an email from you saying, here's my memoir. And I didn't even know you were writing it at the time. So
yeah.
What prompted you to start it?
Well, I never thought I would. I mean, we had this conversation several times, and I've always felt very wedded to fiction, really. I mean, if you snap me in half like rock, you'll find novelist written in there. And I was so relieved to go back to it when I finished it. It was just such a relief because, the truth is hard, as you know. But I think it's funny. I'm not sure what it was. I think something changed, and I suddenly became interested in the idea that the sort of near-death experience is quite an interesting lens through which you can view a life. I think the two things that always really put me off writing a memoir was the first one is it seems like a huge tax on friends and family, because if you're going to tell your story's interleaved, and you're in this whole kind of web with other people's lives, and that's a tricky line to cross. It's a tricky sort of balancing act.
I mean, your family is in there.
Yeah, but no one is named.
No one's named, no.
The only person who's got his real name is my husband. And the other thing, I'm very, I'm very averse to chronology.
Yes, as the structure of this book attests.
Yeah.
Because it's 1980 and then it's 1990,
Yeah.
and you take you're very liberal with time.
Well, I've always felt that chronology as a kind of narrative structure is very tyrannical. I don't think we as human beings are made up in the sort of very, very neat sequential from A to B. I don't think our memories work like that, and our personalities and our brains. I mean, mine certainly doesn't actually, for other reasons perhaps. And so I've always been. I'd never wanted to write the kind of book that said, I was born in Ireland, and then I was an infant, and I went to school, and all that's kind of sort of very tedious. Yeah. What felt to me anyway as a tedious sort of chronological plod. Yeah. And something so coming up with this idea of these brushes with death was quite liberating in a sense, because I thought, actually, I don't have to be chronological. The sort of, for me, the book is kind of written thematically. It's grouped in terms of sort of theme and the chapters that go together. Because, I do think that there are things that happen to us when we're 5 or whatever, and they can completely submerge. They go completely under the surface, and then they can re-emerge when something happens when we're 30, and it will chime, and it will come back. And to me, that was the more interesting structure to pursue.
Yeah. So yeah, because there are sections called cerebellum, spine. I mean, you're talking generally about the thing that's avoided killing you, just about.
Well, it's arranged by body part rather than time.
Yeah. Yes. By near misses. Do you not think it's extraordinary that you've had so many? Because you're so matter of fact about it. I mean, I don't. There's probably 17 in this entire room, but there's you.
The funny thing is, I think I didn't really realise that until I wrote it down. you know, and I always wanted to call it I Am, which of course comes from Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. And the subtitle was always going to be 17 Brushes with Death. And because I think I quite like the sound of number 17. And I hate to tell you, there were actually others which were on the cutting room floor, which didn't make it.
Wait there, so could it have been like 24?
No, not that many. But, you know, I picked the ones that I thought were interesting. There was a few sort of repeated. There was another near drowning, which I thought it just gets boring after a while. I got that one out.
That's great. No more near drowning. We've done drowning. We've done drowning.
But I mean, to be fair, two of them aren't mine. You know, the last chapter is about what it's like parenting a child who has many more brushes with death than perhaps other children do. So I think, and of course, the last chapter is the reason why I wrote the book in a sense, because, you know, my family, we live, one of my kids has a medical condition where she often has brushes with death herself. And so I think it was that, I was going through that experience, really. I mean, the book is written to all my children, but it's about, you know, how near-death experiences change us. You know, we come through them, and, you know, we sort of go to the brink of life, and, you know, if you are lucky enough to come back, you're always going to be a different person. You're going to be changed by that experience.
By every single brush with death.
Yeah, absolutely. They take up residence inside you. You can never be the same again, I think. And so I think I was trying to understand, you know, we were living through these experiences with my daughter, and I was trying to understand so I could help her in a sense, you know, to sort of with her experiences, and also try to understand what she was going through. So in a way, you know, I often think books are, you know, you're writing about things that you don't understand because it's an effort to understand them. You know, you're trying to pin down what's happened to you and what's happened to others, and you're trying to organise it, and you're trying to, you know, get authority over it. I mean, that's what the word author means in a sense. You know, you're trying to pin it down with grammar and sentences and paragraphs. I mean, of course, it's illusory because you can never control your life, but fleetingly, while you go over your manuscript, you think, yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, I've mastered those incidents.
But you haven't.
I have here with me a copy of your newest novel, of which there are precious few in the world. It is called Hamnet. This is a proof, which Maggie will be taking away with her. When is it out?
It's out, I should know this, shouldn't I? End of March.
End of March.
Yeah.
It's the story of Shakespeare's son, Hamnet, who inspired Hamlet. Very unimaginative changing of just one letter there, Shakespeare. But would you give us a reading from it, which I know you have not done anywhere in the world?
So no pressure,
no pressure at all. World exclusive, casual.
Okay, exactly. Keep it light. So this is Hamnet, and he is at this moment, he's searching the house for somebody because his twin sister Judith has fallen very ill. The room is filled with gloom, coverings pulled over most of the windows. His grandfather is standing with his back towards him in a crouched position, fumbling with something, papers, a cloth bag, counters of some sort. Hamnet gives a polite cough. His grandfather wheels around, his face furious, wild, his arms flailing through the air as if warding off an assailant. "Who's there?" he cries. "It's me, Hamnet." His grandfather sits down with a thud. "You scared the wits out of me," he cried. "Whatever do you mean, creeping about like that?" "I'm sorry," Hamnet said. "I was calling and calling, but no one answered. Judith is unwell, and they've gone out." His grandfather speaks over him with a curt flick of his wrist. "What do you want with all those women, anyway?" He seizes the neck of a pitcher and aims it towards a cup. The liquid, ale, Hamnet thinks, slops out precipitously, some into the cup and some onto the papers on the table, causing his grandfather to curse, then dab at them with his sleeve. For the first time it occurs to Hamnet that his grandfather might be drunk. "Do you know where they've gone?" Hamnet asked. "Eh?" his grandfather says, still mopping at his papers. His anger at their spoiling seems to unsheath itself and stretch out from him like a rapier. Hamnet can feel the tip of it wander about the room, seeking an opponent. "Don't stand there gawping," his grandfather hisses. "Help me." Hamnet shuffles forward a step, then another. He is wary, his father's words circling his mind. Stay away from your grandfather when he's in one of his black humours. Be sure to stand clear of him. Stay well back, do you hear? I need to know you'll be safe when I'm not here to see to it. Hamnet believes he is well back. He is at the other side of the fireplace. His grandfather couldn't reach him here, even if he tried. His grandfather is draining his cup with one hand and shaking the drops off a sheet of paper with the other. "Take this," he orders, holding out the page. Hamnet bends forward, not moving his feet, and takes it with the very tip of his fingers. His grandfather's eyes are slitted, watchful. His tongue pokes out of the side of his mouth. He sits in his chair, hunched, an old, sad toad on a stone. "And this." His grandfather holds out another paper. Hamlet bends forward in the same way, keeping the necessary distance. He thinks of his father, how he would be proud of him, how he would be pleased. Quick as a fox, his grandfather makes a lunge.
So what drove you to tackle that?
Well, you know, it's a book I've been wanting to write for a really long time, actually. It's one of those books that I've been circling around, and then I went off and wrote a book about Ireland, and then I thought, no, I'll do it now. And then I went off and wrote a book about the whole world, and then I wrote a memoir. So I've been putting it off for a long time, because, you know, who writes a novel about Shakespeare? Who does that, really?
You.
I know, me now.
It's utterly gripping, the start of it. I've read the first chapter, and it is amazing. I can't wait to finish it. Please join me in thanking Maggie O'Farrell. Rick Samada is a Guardian columnist, actor and survivor. I Never Said I Loved You is his memoir of love and loss, self-harm and survival. It's really funny, it made me cry with laughter, and it also just made me cry. It's already a Sunday Times bestseller. Please welcome Rick Samada. I thought actually you could give us a wee bit from the beginning, because it sets the scene and the tone, I think, very well.
Yes, OK, I'd love to. OK. Christmas morning, 2010. I'm in bed with my mother in a Bangkok sex hotel. It is my 30th birthday. How have things got this out of hand? To wind back a little, I hadn't been looking forward to a fourth decade. My father had died 3 years before, and I'd responded with great resourcefulness by having a comprehensive breakdown, ending a nurturing relationship and moving back home. I couldn't work or go out and didn't want to be seen. A life shrunk to 4 small walls was all that seemed manageable. I was watching The Lion King a lot and doing all the voices. So when my mother announced we were going to Australia and Thailand for Christmas, I was unresponsive. Having been in the UK since 1979, she had recently become a British citizen and wanted to celebrate by flying as far away from Britain as geographically possible. She wanted me to see the Great Barrier Reef, she said. I pictured men in shorts throwing pigskins at my head. But I had no other plans. Christmas in Thailand sounded like an idea from a 30 Things to Do Before You're 30 peak experience hit list. The ones that fixate on kayaking, taking ayahuasca on Machu Picchu, or inconveniencing dolphins in Cancun. However, those lists are aimed at sexy young couples who like house music, not a depressed 29-year-old and his elderly mother. Don't imagine beach huts or tinsel-strewn palm trees. Owing to a lack of online hut booking facilities and mobility issues, we were to spend the week sharing a Bangkok hotel room. Many people have a dated, stereotypically seedy mental image accompanying the words Bangkok hotel room. Those people would be correct. Instead of chocolates, the staff had left condoms on the pillows of the bed. The bed my mother and I were sharing. The door to the bathroom was a barely frosted glass slat, a saloon door to a nightmare. A week on a porn set was not how I'd pictured becoming a man. At least, not like this.
I've become slightly obsessed by your mother.
I get this a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know we're here to talk about you, but can we just talk about your mum for a bit? She's a 4'9", you say she's Yoda-sized Ninja Turtle.
Yeah, sort of, she often wears a backpack, and she'll never take it off, so she'll sit down and she'll sort of have, the chair will be mostly taken up a backpack. Yeah. So she's sort of round, like a lollipop shape, and she talks in quite jumbled up English, and she's also just this incredible force of nature, she's really a life raft. She taught me, after my father died, I was so worried that she was going to wither and, become this person that I had to worry about all the time. And it was actually the opposite. I became just a husk of a person. And she decided to really embrace life. And she teaches herself a new skill every year. So it's so unpredictable. It's Italian literature one year, it's millinery the next, it's street art. I always think she's going to get arrested soon, one day. you know, she's just, I go to the house and there's guitar tabs from Nirvana songs on open on. She's learning conga drumming. I mean, now I'm saying it out loud, she actually sounds like she may have mental issues. But she's also an incredible, inspiring figure, and everyone that meets her she walks around like the mayor. People just wave to her, and I'm like, who's that? She's like, I don't know. People just love her. And
how is she responding to the kind of fame that being in a memoir brings?
Well, I tried to have a really sensitive conversation. I was like, no, I've written about you and our relationship, and I know that that's quite a tricky, sensitive thing. And, you know, then people will think that they have a sort of personal connection to you. And so I tried to be as sensitive as I could. And she was just like, yeah, when is it coming out? I love it. Can't wait. She was like,
Did you share it with her when you were writing it? Any bits of it, or did you?
Yeah, so there are difficult conversations in the book that you can't have everyone else know first. You have to have the conversation. And I guess, so I actually came to Scotland to have a difficult conversation with my mum about the fact I was going to be writing about some sexual abuse that I experienced when I was young. And that was obviously an incredibly difficult conversation, and I think that's why I came to Scotland, because what happens in Glasgow stays in. That's not the rule, isn't it? But
you were on one of these bus tours that you get a leaflet for. I mean, it was so surreal to me reading it. I just thought, what did the other people around you as well on the bus feel? But anyway, you were going to some pretty random places. Had you thought about having that conversation with your mother for a really long time? Had you tried to have it sooner?
I think honestly no, because it was the secret thing, you know, the thing that you never tell anyone. That was mine. And so I would have gone through my whole life never telling her or my friends, you know, most people that I know. And I think that's what most people do. They just don't tell people. And actually, I'm so glad I did, because I've realised that this corrosive thing that just unknits you as you grow, it can just be lifted like that by being accepted and seen and loved. And I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't written this book. I wouldn't have had that conversation with her. So
really, it was writing the book that prompted you to have the conversation?
Yeah, so I owe, even before whatever happens with the book, I owe it my life, really. It doesn't sound like an overstatement to say that to me.
One of the things that sets this book aside from other memoirs, you're very upfront about what's happened to you straight away, and the book is actually about exploring how it affected you and how you resisted the effects of that. And I think for me, that's what really sets this memoir apart, is that, you know, that revelation right at the beginning, and then a sort of unfurling and refurling. One of the things, sounds so judgmental, I was going to say, one of the unhealthiest choices I think you made, but I am going to just say that, because you say it, I mean, you became an actor.
Such self-loathing, yeah. Became a professional actor.
You went to like an acting madrasa.
I went to a school that really breaks its students down and is really unrelenting and just tries to make them hard Spartan warriors of the board, and just tears into you and tells you you're nothing and you're rubbish and you need to be better. And I think that was a conscious choice, because I felt like nothing. I felt that's all I deserve. And I wanted to be flayed and stripped. And then ideally built up new, but that didn't happen so much.
But it did do one very positive thing for you, I think, which is put you in your body in a way where you felt you owned your own body. I thought that was really interesting and unanticipated.
Yeah, I think a lot of survivors have this dislocated experience of their own bodies, and I certainly did. And it was so traumatic for me. And it was an incredible thing that drama school just teaches you. You are your body, you're a presence on a stage or a camera, and you can't just be up here, and you can't have all these little back alleys and sort of mental workarounds you have to keep yourself safe. You are your body and you're here, and people are looking at you and they see you. And just having to become comfortable with that was incredibly healing, because we are our bodies as much as our minds, and if we don't feel comfortable in one or the other, then we're not fully a person, really.
You graduated and you got a massive role straight away with the RSC in Stratford-upon-Avon. I mean, that was kind of like dream gig, amazing start to your career.
Yeah, it was. I think I had an amazing acting career in reverse, because I got this incredible job to begin with. It was my first job as a lead at the RSC. And then I sort of went from that to slightly less good, still respectable journeyman roles. And then by the end of it, I was sort of just scraping together whatever auditions I could find.
Your dad died when you got that role at the RSC.
Yeah, it felt like a huge shift in my life. I came out as an actor, I got this huge job. My dad saw the play, it was at the RSC in Stratford. Yeah, and that's the gift I've now learned to see from it, is that my career didn't go that way, but my father had been worried about me becoming an actor because it's an awful business. And he was right to worry. But he saw me have this success. And that sort of was comforting to him to realise that his son might be okay. And then he died, so he wasn't okay. But I felt that I'd given him something back and he was able to not worry about me. Yeah.
Do you think you'd still be acting if he hadn't died?
It's one of those counterfactuals that's sort of impossible to really put yourself in, but...
I'll put it this way, would you take a role if somebody offered it to you now?
Unquestionably, yes.
There you go. You're an actor.
It's like herpes. The bug never leaves your system.
You end each chapter with a letter to, actually not always somebody who's in the chapter, it's often somebody else altogether. Why did you include those letters, and have any of the people responded that you've written to? The ones who can respond.
Yeah, quite a lot of them are dead.
Yeah.
So less. The book felt like a sort of, I needed to have a conversation with these demons from my past, which that makes it sound like an exorcism, which maybe it is, but a funny one, funny exorcism. It's quite a good strapline. So I wanted to, and it's not necessarily the people that are the demons, but it's what I was going through, or they were on the receiving end of it, or something we shared was the thing I needed to process, all these unresolved things. So it was my way of really directly addressing those things that I was most scared of. Whether it's my abuser or the things I didn't get to say to my father, or just a boy I stabbed at school once because I was in a strange place.
You stabbed him with a compass, which there's a bit of context there.
I really hated maths.
Yeah, exactly. The compass just gives that necessary context. I thought he might get in touch with you.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Maybe he's got a restraining order.
Yeah, that might very well have happened. So are you going to write fiction? And I'm asking you that question because as somebody who's written a memoir, I was always asked it, and then I did go on to write fiction, but I wonder if that was something that you are interested in at all.
Yes, it is. Yes, I would love to. Just the idea of not feeling like you're accountable to real people, and you're not sort of turning people into characters, which feels like a very strange thing to do.
What makes you think that doesn't happen with fiction?
Okay, so you're still having to like...
Of course you are. I mean, you're in a constant conversation with, these people that you create, and they might be inspired by real people or not, but they become real, and you're accountable to them in the real world. Sorry to burst that wee bubble for you there.
Do you have to apologise to them?
Yeah, sometimes.
Do you ever make love to them?
I haven't written anybody that hot yet, but I will now that you've suggested that. I'll hold that thought, not here, but I will hold that thought at a later date. Anyway, listen, please join me in thanking Rick Samada. Janice Galloway has won the Saltire Society Scottish Book of the Year and every other prize going, frankly, for her novels The Trick Is to Keep Breathing and Clara. Between slender volumes of stunning short stories, she gifted us 2 memoirs of her girlhood in Saltcoats, telling the story of that small town through 3 generations of unforgettable women. Her memoirs are close to my heart and to my home, but before we get to them and to her, we're going to go to Dundee and meet the people at the D.C. Thompson Book Club and find out what they thought about All Made Up. D.C. Thompson in Dundee is known for producing some of the UK's favourite comics and magazines. The Beano, The Dandy, Oor Wullie, The Bruins, The People's Friend and Jackie. But while I have a soft spot for Ur Wully, I'm actually here to meet the company's very own book club. Nice
Welcome to DC Thompson.
Thank you very much. This is the home of so many of my childhood friends. One of the group, Angela, is editor of The People's Friend, celebrating its 150-year anniversary, which makes it the longest-running women's weekly magazine in the world. When I was a kid, I read The Beanos and The Dandies and Commando, and then when I'd finished those and I was at my granny's house, I'd read Her People's Friends. So it was a very balanced childhood. Yeah. What is The People's Friend identity? What makes it special?
What it does better than any other magazine in the world, in my opinion, is publish fiction. 50% of the magazine is fiction and always has been.
And what kind of fiction is it that you specialise in?
It's feel-good fiction.
Right.
We cover a wide range of topics, so anything from romance to family stories to murder mysteries to supernatural, but everything makes you feel good for having read it. So no sad endings with us.
No sad endings.
No sad endings.
Does that mean you don't ever kill people off? I seem to remember people dying in the Odd People's Friends story.
We do kill them off sometimes, yes, but ultimately there's a positive ending in there somewhere.
Okay, so shall we go and meet the rest of the book group?
Let's do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's go.
Okay, so we've read Janice Galloway, All Made Up. Who's got an opinion on it? What do you think of it?
I absolutely loved it from the start to the finish. I very, very rarely have read a book that I have read as quickly as this. She just really, really resonated with me in pretty much every single word that she wrote.
Growing up in an all-male environment, I found very, very few points of interest in this book at all. There's certainly a bit in it where she says she makes a judgment on her sister's change, down to the way that her makeup bag has changed, and it went completely over my head. I had no idea what was being discussed there.
I get what you mean about it being a world you didn't know, or like references to stuff you didn't know about, but that's what I liked about it. For me, I felt like I'd gone on this expedition into the unknown.
I thought it was really interesting in this book that Janice chose not to use quotation marks, and I did wonder if that tied in with the all made up title, in that she was giving the hint that nothing was a direct quote. It was open to interpretation as to who said what.
There was a lot of times I thought she was an unreliable narrator. There were gaps in what she was telling us, and I was looking at it and thinking, what is it you're not telling me here?
I enjoyed the book, but I tried to empathise the whole way through. I come from a single parent family. It's my mum, my sister and it always has been. But I like them, and they're really nice people.
So you get to ask Janice one question, what would it be?
I'd quite like to ask her if anybody's ever said to her, do you think you're it now?
I dare them. That lot spend their day working with words, and all it does is make them love books even more, and I love them for it. Please welcome Janice Galloway. When you come. Just have a wee seat. Isn't it nice?
It's very pretty, Damien.
Thank you very much, Janice. So we're going to talk about the second one of your memoirs, which is All Made Up, and I thought I'd ask you to read us a wee bit about your sister.
Oh, my sister. My sister as was. There she is. My blazer spouted Bowie badges. I hooked my skinny school tie into a fat double Windsor and loosened it to the hilt. I tied my hair up with a chiffon scarf and slicked Sugar Frost's Surprise on my lips. Getting boy conscious, Cora said. You can tell it's after boys this year. She's not one of the kind, boy conscious, my mother said. We're not all like you. They could think what they liked. I had to redo the tie to get it just right, and that took concentration. The scarf came loose before I reached the school gates, and the lipstick surrendered to a bag of crisps at 10:30. But I was new to this stuff. I would get the hang. Creating a veneer of sophistication was not child's play, as my sister had demonstrated for years. Serious drag took serious application. You only get out what you put in, Cora said, flicking her lashes against the mascara. Understand what I'm saying? She looked at me, one owl-sized eye and the other still unpainted, as she swapped hands with a little wand of black gunge. Nobody's going to hand you nothing in a plate, madam. Keeping yourself nice is half the bloody battle. Now bugger off, get me a coffee. I heard and I obeyed. Cora, on the subject of appearance, had professional authority. As long as she lived, no one ever accused my sister of not trying, at least as far as looks were concerned. Once all that effort had been for the pictures, the fare, for going out, and now it was to cement her position as head of typing at a Nile Street stockbroker's office, where she worked bossing juniors about till they were a credit to the firm. Every morning, my sister drew on her eyebrows as she drank her coffee. After years of plucking, she'd left the originals only as 2 little commas, the back halves of which had to be penciled in or they wouldn't have existed at all. I'd seen her draw and erase those efforts with cold cream half a dozen times rather than go to the train with less than mirror-like symmetry of her brows. A good finish took willpower, but it was over in a little time. Stabbed in the eye with an eyebrow brush, my mother could suppress her tear ducts in a fraction of the time demanded by normal women and still catch the Glasgow train without breaking sweat.
That was less of a reading and more of a conjuring. I felt like she was right here with us.
No, you would have noticed. My sister. You would have spotted that right away.
She's one of the scariest siblings that I've ever read about, in fiction or non-fiction, I have to say.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, she headbutts you on the first 5 pages of the book.
Yeah, don't give it all away. You know,
I mean, Janice, it has been out for nearly 10 years.
I know.
Spoilers.
I know.
But let's talk about how she presents to the world. She's, at this point, I think she's dark-haired. Yep. And she's just always immaculate. Mm-hmm. And what is beneath that?
My God, am I allowed to say? It's the
Yeah, you can
strangest
say what
thing.
you like.
I mean, it was an all-woman household. My dad had been a drunk and died when I was really quite small. And nobody seemed to be terribly sorry, so you just kind of took that in the chin and you moved on, and it was a household of 3 women.
Just stop there a minute. You say nobody was very sorry. Did your mum feel relieved? Did you feel sad, glad? What was that actually really like?
I was 4,
Right.
so it was just confusion, really.
Right.
It was just confusion. But certainly my mother would have had certainly a feeling of relief combined with a feeling of regret, because very few people must enter marriage wanting it to not work. And it was almost as though my father had entered a marriage wanting it to not work. He just kept drinking. And for that reason, none of us ever went to pubs, none of us ever entered places where drink was on sale or anything like that. And when he died, my sister left her husband, who was there already, and came back to live because the idea of 3 women living together appealed to her far more than staying with her husband and child now. That, I suppose, speaks for itself.
Did she never, ever go back?
She never went back, no. One day her son turned up at the door to see us, but that's a whole different story. That's way years after. He left fairly quickly, but he did turn up at the door to see us.
So, and she just turned up and you just accepted her back?
Well, I was 4.
Well, your mum, I mean.
Oh, yes. My mother was... She was a bit of a pushover, especially to her children. It was like you couldn't say no. Nora got fed her tea on her lap every night after she came in off the train. And she would get herself comfortable. She would sit in the front room and just wait. And Mum would come in. You always felt there should be a piper with a plate of chips. That was the nightly chips would be piped in. And when Nora had finished hers, we'd go, what was left? So it was a well-trained household to have someone as a parental figure, if you like, almost like, she acted like my mother's parent, almost. She had to be pleased, she had to enjoy the food, she had to like what was going on round about her. And since she was the only person bringing money into the house, I can see why that would come about.
And she was the breadwinner?
It was gratitude, I think, on my mother's part. It was just confusion in mine for a long time.
And did your mum put up with or understand her temperament, do you think? Or her temper, rather, just?
Well, I think she understood a bit of it. My sister went out a lot after she left her husband and child. She wanted to be out a lot because she had a theory that the ex-husband, well, not the ex-husband, just the husband, would turn up at the door. And she didn't really want to see him. So the best thing to do was go to the dancing a lot. And she went to the dancing a lot. And who do you meet at the dancing, ladies?
And gents.
Who do you meet at the dancing? You meet men. You meet lots of men. And Mum was never happy with her being out, especially if she was late, because that only meant one thing to my mother, that somehow she would need to be rescued at some point. But I think I'd be heading into secondary school before I thought of Nora's circumstances as actually dangerous to her. And that was what had been wrong with my mum all that time. She was of an age to start thinking, one night my daughter might not come home. What do I do then? One night my daughter might come home damaged or hurt or something like that. What will I do then? And that was always on her mind. My mum was her fondness represented itself as a desire to stop you from doing anything or going anywhere. She would have liked you to be there right under her nose. I don't know if that's particularly Scottish trait, but I think of it as one.
And to the extent that, you know, when you went to the big school and you got your school uniform with your badge on, Ad Astra, I was thinking of you when that film came out. I was like, she'll be seeing her school logo every single where she goes. You know, how did she feel about you? How did she feel about you going to school?
Is this to secondary school? Terribly proud. You had to pass an exam to get in them days. I don't know how many of you in the audience will have known the time when you had to pass an exam to get into the good school. You could get into the other school without passing any exams, but to get into the good one, and that was the aspiration. So I get into the good school. And then, of course, they merged. And we got everybody. And it changed lives in so many ways, I can't tell you. There were girls from very sheltered backgrounds who really saw things that they had never seen in their lives before. And then there were those who had seen quite a lot of those things who were getting to see the reaction to that. And it was surprising to find how many teachers remembered my sister with enormous fondness and would say, "How's your sister? Is she still lovely?" Yeah.
She's still my sister.
In her own way. Yeah, in her own way.
Well, there is a huge fondness for her. And also there's a respect/fear, which I found absolutely fascinating, the way that she protects you. There's that family wedding, the scene where she intervenes. Talk about that.
There was I had an auntie. For all the Scottish people in the audience, you may have had an auntie like this, okay? She was the kind of person that you couldn't do the right thing ever. You were somebody else's Wayne, and your Waynes were better than her sister's Waynes. You know, that was it. They were the real Waynes. You always did everything wrong. And she was quite moany. And we ended up at, I think, one of her children's weddings. One of her, who would be my... God knows, I can't do all this family relationship kind of thing, but it would be somebody I was supposed to know and didn't, because we seldom went out because my mother liked us to stay in. And I remember it was my sister who came up and saved me from my auntie, because she would keep saying, "It's no so fancy at your school now, is it? You're no so clever now. Both of my lassies are married." You know, and it was a feather in the cap kind of thing. And I had no idea what one said to that kind of goading. I believe it was quite a thing, particularly where we lived in the central belt of Scotland, that you would be goaded by relatives to kind of establish something about the style of upbringing that they personally had. And it was my sister who came and rescued me from that.
I loved it in that moment.
I think I loved it in that moment too, but that'd probably be one of very few.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a wee bit about boys. There are three main boys. You actually did a wee slight blush then. You were like, boys? Oh, like that. No, let's talk about Bradley and Phil and Jacob, and how you negotiated what is obviously puberty, but which you say in the book, there's no word for puberty then, just like there wasn't really much of a word for being a teenager yet.
Yeah.
These are kind of unknown quantities that you were navigating. So how did you send yourself into girlhood with these boys?
You don't send yourself into girlhood, Damien. You land in girlhood. You just, am I right? Yeah, I mean, it just happens to you. And who it happens to you through is the boys in your class now having a different attitude towards you, which will either be, there's so many things it could be. It will either be fear. It will be the first time they've ever been interested in you for a whole variety of reasons, none of which you really understand as yet. It will be attraction. Okay, you can usually tell the attraction ones, but it usually always comes with a lot of effing and blinding boys. If they're going to be upfront about attraction, they'll be upfront about most things. And whole of life starts to shift, whereas you thought you were an equal with all the other people in your class, and it was being clever that kind of got you a thumbs up.
A high flyer.
Yeah, that's it. Now it was what the boys thought of you. And I found that terribly difficult to try and get my head around. It didn't seem fair. But then I cottoned on, my body caught up with me, and then I cottoned on to what that was partly about. And life changed. I started, I think, to fear I was becoming like my sister, who frankly could not get enough men to sit round her in a pub and enjoy a blether with and go home with one of them at night. I thought this was going to be the life in front of me, and I got so scared I got good at exams, and that was going to be the way out.
And then you got pregnant?
And then I got pregnant, yeah. That was a bit of a mistake. We had been to the doctor, two of us. No, I'm telling you this story. We'd been to the doctor and asked for contraception, and he told me to leave. He said, I'm a good Catholic, and you will leave.
What did you think he was casting out a bad spirit?
I don't know. I didn't know what it meant.
What year was that?
Because I'm not a Catholic myself, and I don't know what some of the stranger rites of Catholicism might be. I didn't know that wasn't a legitimate thing to do. Boyfriend very embarrassed because he had suggested going there. And so we went home, and to cheer me up, we had a couple of drinks, and one thing leads to another, and within about 6 weeks, I was back at the doctor pregnant. I thought I'd take the news back to him first. Anyway, it all got sorted out in the end, one way and another. I didn't have the baby, but he insisted that he tell my mother, I think, in order to relieve himself. Yes, he told my mother. He went round to the house. And when I came back from school, there was a whole confrontation thing. But it was actually, it worked out well in the end because, I mean, she was going to have to know sooner or later that Nora wasn't the only wild child in the house. There was somebody else who was meeting boys out there. And let's face it, one's life, as you know, changes.
It does.
Yeah.
These memoirs changed my life. They changed how I thought about my childhood, and they made me feel that I could share my voice in a way that I didn't feel that I could do before. So, I mean, I read them before I started writing Maggie and Me, and they quite genuinely liberated me because I felt that I was reading a story about another working class person from the west of Scotland with a less than regular home life, shall we say, and it kind of gave me permission to tell my own story. I wonder how you got to the point of being able to write the memoirs.
There's a very curt answer to that, and it sounds like quite a cruel answer, and it was my sister and my mother both died.
So
it's the start of some people's lives.
Yeah.
Which sounds, it's a regrettable thing to utter. But it was true. And I met many people at the time who were so under the thumb of parents, or parents who were so worried about what the neighbours would say about you. It's a lot of heads nodding over there. Yeah. What the neighbours would say about you, that your life tended to be very restricted, or you would let your mother down. Now, as her husband had let her down, the last thing I wanted to do was involve in that. And Nora was all for the idea that I should look after my mother, because she had other things to do. And it was kind of liberating that the guy went there and he said, more or less, she needs a bit of looking after as well. I don't know how many times I see your other daughter, but I never see this one.
Right.
Maybe you should have a chat. And we did. We had a very sticky chat indeed. Very, very sticky chat indeed, but we both knew what each other meant, so we never had to go back and do it again.
One of the things that you tackle in both of these books, and you do it with the titles, both of which suggest that there's a degree of fiction to memoir, or a degree of artifice.
Yes.
I would like you to talk about that.
Well, it's sown with artifice because for a start you're writing down sentences and one must construct sentences, and within the sentence the things you must construct have to adhere in some wise to things that have happened or are likely to have happened at some point to people. Now, there's only so much of your own experience will relate to other people, but you will be able to, I hope, talk about areas of experience, for example, the coming of age that girls go through, where boys begin to act differently towards them, and you frankly have no idea what is going on for a certain, well, maybe that was just me, but I don't think so. You have no idea what's going on for a certain period of time. And all of that kind of coming together, I think, was it was a kind of liberating thing in its own way, to have to come to terms with the fact of growing up and not being who you were. And I suppose, therefore, I never saw it as something that was urgent ever to show to my mother who I might be. I didn't know. And what eventually sorted that out was the best music teacher in the whole world, who was Ken Hetherington. I don't know if any of you are from Ayrshire, but there's a man called Kenneth Hetherington who must have saved lots of otherwise confused lives by giving them a violin or a viola or a double bass in one case. It's a little guy who got the double bass and it changed his life.
Because it broke his back?
No, because it grew him somehow. He got used to this kind of thing.
Is music still a big part of your life? Yeah.
My husband sang for a living. He will still sing for a living. If anyone would like to book him, he's up at the back. And so it's still a part of my life.
What happened to your novel that you told me you were writing about castrati? Not that I'm checking in on your hassling you or anything, but I think we talked about that 5 years ago.
Yeah, there's half of it there. If you would like to write the other half, all you need to do is wink.
I'm doing that.
Years.
Is it going to be finished?
I doubt it, to be frank. But at the same time, now that I've said that, I'm annoyed at myself, so I might. I don't know.
Just to spite yourself.
Confusing answer of the year. I have absolutely no idea. I know that half of it is there, and one day I'll go back and look at it, and if it's better than I thought...
I'd really like you to do that.
Would you really like...
I really would like you to do that.
Would you really like to read it and tell me if it's any good?
Yeah, I'll take a look.
I'd
love to
heard
see
it.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. So listen, the DC Thompson Book Club wanted me to ask you a question, and the question they wanted me to ask you is a question that comes up throughout the memoir, which is, so you think you're it, so do you think you're it now?
No.
No.
No, I'm married, and that keeps things very level on a whole lot of fronts. I just heard my husband making a noise. Yeah. There is something very... I think there is also something very freeing about living with other people, and we've tended to live in a house that has other adults in it at the same time. Most often people are travelling through, there'll be actors or there'll be singers, and they're passing through. And it's a very healthy way to live, because it stops you being fed up with each other. You get fed up with who's in the house, and you've at least got that to talk about, that kind of thing.
That sounds very tempting. I might actually move in just for a wee while. Please join me in thanking Janice Galloway. Now it's time for some poetry. Andrew McMillan's new collection, Playtime, takes us back to his teenage years, and I could say to you that it's about violence, class, and sexuality and masculinity and all of those other inities. Or I could just tell you that his poems made me feel feelings that I thought I'd forgotten. These are the verses that I wish I'd been given at school. Tonight he's going to perform Glimpse, a poem about seeing something you long for and also fear. Please welcome Andrew McMillan.
Glimpse. On the pitch by my house, the weekly game of football. There was one lad, already famous in our class for having snogged a girl and still my friend, despite the pull of the pack mentality I always felt outside of. I had no skill, could only put my body in front of someone else in hopes of slowing them for a moment. And this time, it caused my friend to fall, and in the split second it took for him to regain himself, I saw, slipped from shorts and briefs, his whole private self, though he hadn't noticed, still giggling at my sudden prowess at defence. And after that, there were other times, crowding into a friend's bedroom, me pretending not to look as someone showed himself to a girl, and the emptiness that followed, nobody yet ready to do the things that come after, though it was still deliberate and so different from that earlier time, the grass, that glimpse of something that seemed to be all potential, tiny sapling, not yet seeding, just another part of our innocence, fear and lust and shame, not yet ripened to full blush. Thank you.
That's it for tonight. Please join me in thanking the DC Thompson Book Club. All of you for being here in Shira, and my amazing guests, Rick Samada, Janice Galloway, Maggie O'Farrell, and Andrew McMillan. Next time, I'm heading west to Helensburgh. I will be talking humour with Chris McQueer, John Niven, better get the swear box, David Nichols and Marion Keyes. I hope to see some of you then. Until then, happy reading.